Hello everyone, my name is Mike, I'm the Head of Partnerships here at AVASK, and I'm delighted to be joining you today with Yoni Kozminski, who is the co-founder of Escala and MutiplyMii. Hello Yoni, thank you for joining me today.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honour to be down here in Southampton with you and the AVASK team.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. So tell me, how do you fit into the e-commerce ecosystem?
Yeah, great question. I'll take a few steps back and say I was formerly an e-commerce seller after spending about a decade in creative advertising and digital marketing. So came into the space really understanding some of the pain points around sellers. And so MutiplyMii, we help find high value talent out of the Philippines to help effectively operate businesses more effectively without compromising on the caliber of talent. So all the talent that you'd need to run an e-commerce business, we help identify, whereas Escala, on the other hand, is a process improvement consulting practice. So as companies get a little larger, it becomes a lot more complicated to run those operations. So we'll put our consulting team into the business, we'll identify the pain points operationally, and then help design that for scale for 2 and 3 and 5 and sometimes north of $100 million sellers.
Wow, that's impressive. And what markets do you currently operate in?
Yeah, great question. We are typically, or I'd say our primary market, we support US-based sellers, so probably 80+% of the business is out of the US, but work with a lot in the UK, some out of Scotland. I guess that's still the UK, right?
Oh, yes.
Still for now.
Let's not talk about politics, just...
let's not go there. Out of Australia and globally, we're supporting clients.
Okay, thanks, Yoni. That was absolutely great. Tell me, what have you seen change in the e-commerce ecosystem over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, the last 12 months have been absolutely jam-packed with changes. Everything from the compression when you talk about supply chain and logistics and, prices going from about $4,000 a container all the way up to 20 at its peak. Not to mention Amazon and other marketplaces as well, starting to catch wind on how easy it's been for sellers to grow. So they're starting to also take a little bit of that compression on the other side. So you've seen that, some of the referral fees and things like that go up as well. But I think one of the more interesting storylines has been, the $15 billion or so of venture capital that's rolled into the space and sort of the rise of the aggregators over the last, I'd say 6 months. We've seen the slowing down of all the acquisitions. So I think people have found that it's not as easy to operate these businesses at scale. And so to put it really simply, Mike, a lot of fluctuation and a lot of change.
Absolutely. And has that change been for the better, do you think, or do you think it's been for the worst?
I think it's going to be short-term pain for long-term gain. So, if you're a seller right now, there's nothing good about prices going up and compression, right? But what I think it is helping sellers to understand is that they need to be a little bit more strategic in how they operate their businesses. So while exponential growth is everything that we all want to achieve, it's how do I do that strategically so that I can scale the business and not just see myself sort of, balloon out without paying attention to the bottom line. So I'd say from a seller perspective, there's that aspect. In being more strategic and more considered around what their decisions are around things like expansion and diversification or building brand and things like that. And I'd say from the aggregator perspective, what we're really starting to find out is that these businesses that people sort of looked at spreadsheets and thought how easy it would be to just acquire a bunch of them and roll them up together. It's not as easy as once thought. And so the professionalization of this space is really what we're going to see happen now, I believe, is that we need to have people getting a lot more serious about what they're doing. And so what that will bring into the market is additional professional services, people really thinking for that long-term strategy. And I would say those are some of the key changes that we'll see.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that you've seen is there's been a great deal of activity that's been going on and a flurry of selling and buying going on within the ecosystem of these businesses. And yes, whether it's sustainable in the long term depends on the strategy and the structure of those businesses going forward, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, over the course of the last sort of 3 years, I'd say up until sort of late 2021, it was a party. And it not only was it a party, the actual parties that you would go to around the e-commerce space were insane. There were events where they would spend $1,000 a head and it would just be the most, extravagant event that you could ever imagine. And a lot of that's dried up right now because no one's buying businesses.
So tell me, Yoni, how do you define a meaningful exit?
Yeah, I mean, if we've looked historically, and when I say historically, I'm talking 6 and 12 months ago, you were seeing multiples go up to sometimes 6 and 7 and 8x for larger businesses. And, Thrasio invented the market about 4 years ago. The multiples you were seeing back then were 1.5 times EBITDA, and it sort of slowly and then pretty quickly climbed. Right now, there's a massive pause from almost all aggregators. There are still some buying them, but I mean, you can see a brand like Elevate came out and said that they're only going to touch brands that are doing more than 2 million in EBITDA, which you're looking at a 8, 9, $10 million revenue business, which is pretty substantial. It's quite a large business to grow to for the average seller. So when I talk about a meaningful exit, sellers have spent their blood, sweat, and tears working around the clock to build these businesses with obviously the goal to have a meaningful exit whereby that money is life-changing. And so to go through that process and to see a multiple now sitting at a 1.5 and a 2 and a 3x on smaller assets or smaller brands that they're building, it doesn't have the same appeal. It's not, I'm going to have this exit and maybe I'm not set up for the rest of my life, but I am in a very, very sound financial position on the back of that. So I would say that just knowing how much work and energy goes into coming up with a concept around a brand and a product and actually bringing it to market and growing the business and expanding to Europe and beyond, these things take a lot of time. And so a meaningful exit to me is reaping the rewards of all the hard work that's gone into building a brand that for a lot of these sellers, let's face it, it's their baby, it's their child. They want to see them grow up and not just walk, but run and and get married.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing from you then, it sounds like today is not the right time to sell. Is that correct?
So I would say it might be the right time if you are prepared to just simply exit your business. If you're at a point where it's too much and that's the option you'll take. But if you're looking for for your greatest multiple that you can get and you're a seller that hasn't quite hit sort of an enterprise value where you're talking about 2 and 3 and 4 million in EBITDA, which we're talking about 10, 15, 20, $30 million, and you're going to sell to a strategic or PE that makes sense, then yeah, I mean, you're just not going to see the multiples that you were seeing even 6 months ago, and definitely not 12 months ago. So it's definitely the market hasn't tanked, but right now there's just a pause. I mean, we're dealing with a global recession right now, or an impending global recession, however you want to talk about it, but that's sort of the reality that we face right now. So e-commerce isn't going anywhere. It's just a matter of, can I build my business to a level that is going to hit either the size that will reach that PE or a strategic aggregator for that matter, or am I just going to get out and the businesses that were selling 12 months ago, I'm not going to see the same yield or return.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I think that's very, very clear now. So that pushes me on to my next point, I think, and the next question, which is all around building a successful and sustainable business that will be basically diversified, I think, and a lot stronger. So when thinking about things like global recessions and things like that, it suddenly becomes, everybody suddenly becomes very, very frightened about business growth and is my business still going to be viable? So thinking about from your viewpoint, why is Europe so essential for your e-commerce expansion in the current climate?
Yeah, great question again. I mean, when I look at what everyone is up to right now, or the current state of the macro market, right? If we're in the reality where few businesses are buying, and particularly businesses that were at the typical size that were being sold 12 months ago, then the only opportunity we really have to reach those heights is to find ways in which we can expand. And so expansion to Europe would have to be one of the lowest hanging fruits to grow your business and continue to grow it, especially if you can find the right resources to enable it. Obviously, I'm not sitting here saying that it's easy to expand a business and to continue to grow. It's very, very capital intensive when you talk about a e-commerce business. You're paying for all of the inventory many months before you're actually realizing that ROI on the sale price, right? So finding ways in which you can continue to grow while bridging that gap until you can see and realize, the ultimate goal for, I think, a lot of sellers will be to sell their business unless they can build the right margins and have, a business that sustains in market forever. But the reality of an environment that we play in here is that it's always going to cost a lot of money to continue to grow. So again, expansion into Europe, especially with the size of the market. I know you have some great stats on it, so I'm not going to muddy the waters here and get it wrong. But what I understand from some of the incredible stuff that AVASK have put out is that if you actually look at the macro market and what the GDP is across the US versus Europe, it's almost the same. I mean, give me the stats here. Help me out here, Mike.
So, absolutely correct. So the US revenue in the e-commerce market is currently sat at $908 billion. And when you consider that Europe, the United States is 50 states, so you've got 50 potentially different and slightly different ways of sales tax working, different rates and things like that. You've got 50 different independent markets in effect working together. Well, Europe currently is at 828 billion. So when you consider that $908 billion to $828 billion is not that big a jump, you suddenly realize that there is just a huge amount of potential within the European market. I mean, the UK is alone, while considering it's a part of the European market, but not necessarily a member of the European Union anymore, it's still Europe's largest marketplace at $199 billion, closely followed by Germany at 141. So when you consider those two marketplaces alone, they are full of opportunities for people to actually take advantage of.
I think there's also some interesting elements around the fact that it's a lot more diversified from a marketplace perspective here too. So, while there's sort of a one-size-fits-all, you've got to be on Amazon in the US, when you expand to Europe, I mean, we were talking before about, I've forgotten where they're out of again, but eMag. They're a small marketplace and they're doing something like close to $2 billion. There's going to be products or brands that fit into some of these subcategories or some sub-marketplaces that could effectively be more valuable than just these macro larger marketplaces. So understanding both which markets and which marketplaces could rapidly change the way in which your P&L sheet looks like.
Absolutely, yeah. Completely accurate there. And again, the alternative online marketplace scene within Europe is actually not that alternative. I think everybody wants to go with the likes of the largest marketplaces, and that is absolutely brilliant. But in some countries, the largest marketplace may not be the obvious choice. And you may consider, like, for example, if you're trading in Poland, Allegro has got 193 million visits per month. 193 million. That is insane amount of traffic. Belgium and Netherlands, bol.com is at 69.8 million. Frugo in the United Kingdom is 10.2 million, and Cdiscount in France is 11 million. It's absolutely staggering that there are so many options, and I think that helps to build a resilient market, a resilient diversification strategy for any business when they're trading within Europe.
And I'd say you could even take it further. If you start to really understand each of these different geographies and cultures, you might find that the brand that you've built for the US market or Canadian market or even just the UK market itself might even be more applicable to one of these other marketplaces or geographies that you hadn't thought of. And so again, getting clarity and understanding where to expand is almost as valuable as knowing how.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, totally right there. I think that's absolutely perfect advice there. So we've covered sort of the lowest hanging fruit, if you like, with regards to expansion and the diversification of your marketplaces. Tell me, what do you foresee occurring in the next 12 months within the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that the next 12 months is probably going to be even more interesting than that of the previous 12 and the 12 before that. We saw this sort of explosion of capital into the space and all of this growth. And now we're going through, I wouldn't call it a winter, but we're going through a rethink and being a little bit more strategic. So over the course of the next 12 months, people have to get a lot more serious as to what they're going to be producing. So there was a lot of talk over the last sort of 6 months. You've got to build brand. The acquisition market and what people are looking for is real brand. But people need to start thinking through what does their strategy look like 12 and 18 and 24 and 36 months out, building a very structured plan. And so when I look at what's going to happen in the market, I think we're going to see some normalization around things like freight and logistics. We've seen it jump up to $20,000 and now come back down to 10. And at some point, these companies or new companies will enter the market and they'll figure it out. We'll start to see sort of a more reasonable price around it, and who knows what happens from a marketplace perspective, and if they'll keep pushing up the cost of the referral fees, as a lot of them refer to them as. I imagine at some point that we're going to have to find that balance, or maybe it'll sit to where it's at. So I will say that there's going to be a lot more professionalization coming into the space, so professional services and professional businesses coming and running. I mean, the aggregators are effectively the professionalization of the space. You've got 100 of these plus businesses coming in and looking to see how they can operate them at scale. So we'll see a shift. You know, I see that the days of finding a product on AliExpress, Alibaba, and slapping a private label sticker on it, you know, those days are long gone. Also, the cost of capital, or rather the cost of capital is going up as well, but the actual level of outlay from an investment standpoint is also going up. So you can't just come in willy-nilly and say, cool, I'm going to put down $5,000, $10,000 and see how things go. You know, you're probably looking at 5-10 times what you were spending even 18 months ago to get a business going. So having a game plan and actually being very calculated in how you're going to deploy your capital, and I would say finding the right capital partners in order to grow the business, and the right strategic partners to help with things like expansion and compliance and things that, you know, quite frankly, it's not always the sexiest businesses operationally, but these are the things that will catch you out if you don't have them really buttoned down from day one.
Absolutely, and I think from the professional services industry, I think we can all, everyone at AVASK can sympathise with the e-commerce sellers, because when you're expanding across borders into new marketplaces, there's a whole raft of new legislation that you need to be compliant with before you start your journey. And too often we see sellers coming to us after they've expanded, and maybe something hasn't gone exactly as planned, and they then need to basically get assistance to try and help them to move their businesses forward and actually grow and continue expanding. My advice has always been, and it always will be, make sure you deploy the right expert at the right time, because you can never have too much advice on your side if you're doing something, and maybe even stepping into the unknown. It can be a very, very beneficial to sit there alongside an agency that has gone through it and does know and can assist you, and can, if you like, hand walk you through the process and make more sense out of what can be a very chaotic ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just walking through the halls here, hearing some of the horror stories, I mean, you know, you can save yourself a lot of money just by making some good decisions on getting the right advice.
So tell me, Yoni, what are your top 3 tips for any business that's looking to make a successful exit?
Yeah, fantastic question again, Mike. I've loved sitting here and you know, to be very candid, have a new joint venture that's launching. So it might be out, the news might be out of the bag already, but this is really what the last 12 months of my life has been almost solely focused on, is understanding how the market shifts and how we can really help sellers. So the business is called South Cole, and it's a growth fund, an exit accelerator to help sellers exit. And so I would say, coming back to your question, what's the advice I would give is that, you know, right at this minute, if you're a business that's not going to sell to PE or a strategic and isn't at an enterprise value that, you know, that really is going to attract a particular sort of buyer, then today's market is not fit for you to sell unless you're happy with a 1.5, 2, maybe a 3 multiple if you're, you know, if you're quite lucky, to be honest with you. I would say the tips I would give to any seller would be, A, find the right capital source that's going to help you grow to a meaningful level, a level that is going to either attract that level of strategic or PE buyer, or once the markets shift and we see sort of 12, 18, 24 months on from now that buyers are actually buying businesses again, and we've understood that, you know, what the impending or the current recession actually is about, and how, you know, bad or not as bad, or wherever we sit, I'd say that'd be the first thing, is find the right capital to help you grow through this time. The next would be to focus on the things that a lot of the potential acquirers are right now don't have the resources or haven't focused on, and that's NPD, new product development. So if you can build your business for exit with the intent to exit, understanding that they're not going to have all these ideas. You as the founder, you come with brilliant ideas around what your brand, you've birthed this brand, you've come up with the new products. So invest more time. You don't necessarily have to launch those products, because the reality is that's going to hurt your EBITDA as you start to launch products. But the reality is, if you can think through what are the next 5 or 10 products and hand them a very well packaged, well oiled business, it is going to open up the buyer pool and be more attractive. So we spend a lot of time in Escala packaging businesses up for sale operationally, and one of the bits of advice we always give is make sure that you have the right product strategy or the right brand strategy to help make sure that you open that up. And I'd say the last thing, outside of capital and outside of building the things like new product development and finding the right suppliers and alternatives and looking for things like IP and ways in which you can build a moat that's beyond just a review, a number of reviews, is timing, right? So I would say if you're not in some critical rush to sell your business today, I would say wait it out. Look to understand what it's going to look like 12 months from now, once the dust has settled and once a lot of these aggregators start buying again, because there's going to see a lot of consolidation over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. And I think a lot of the funds will go toward those acquisitions. But once that's done, and if you've built a really valuable asset, then that's probably going to be the right time for you. So I'd say as well, shameless plug here, but if you're looking for all these types of resources, it's probably worthwhile having a conversation with South Cole and seeing if you're the right business for us to invest in.
So that's all the questions I've got time for today, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for joining me today, Yoni. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. And if you're looking for any business expansion advice, or if you're looking to find any personal solutions, please do get in contact with Yoni Kozminski, and his details will be following at the bottom of this presentation. Yoni, thank you very much, and it's been wonderful talking to you.
Mike, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to spending more time down here.
Absolutely, it's been wonderful seeing you. So thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Mike, I'm the Head of Partnerships here at AVASK, and it's been delightful hosting Yoni today. Do visit us online at www.avaskgroup.com if you're looking to grow or expand your e-commerce business. AVASK is here to help and support your business as well. So visit avaskgroup.com, fill in one of our inquiry forms or speak to us live on one of the live chat functions, and we will be available to talk to you about business expansion. Please feel free to join us again on one of our later episodes, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.